All right, we're back live. Ayo.
Hello, everybody.
All right, welcome back to Your Everyday Rich podcast. I'm your host, Jason, and
Jen.
And if this is your first time joining us, thank you very much. Appreciate you stumbling into us. I'd like to know how you did, so leave us a comment. But if you've stuck around for us for a few episodes, well, thank you again for returning and your support. So much appreciated. We have a very fun day today, episode today. We are interviewing a good friend of ours, and
Her name is.
Well, we'll get to her name. But no, it's as part of kind of we evolve in this podcast, we want to bring on guests that hopefully you can relate to. Like it's almost just like our friends, right? And this whole thing about conversations with our friends, and what a better way to bring a friend, someone I've known for like 20 plus years. Jen, you've known her for a while as well, just through similar circles. So it's always cool to see what your friends are up to and what they're doing to achieve their everyday rich life. But before we get to it, I'll give you the lowdown here, my lowdown. If you've ever attended a wedding in the past 15 years, you've come across our next guest and her business. Claudia Hung is the founder and owner of Portraits on White, your not so average photo booth company. For 22 years, we've seen her build and leave a distinctive mark in the wedding photo industry through her unique photo capturing skills, but also through her bold black and white portraits, aka the not so average, really above average photo booth. All while being a mom, an active twin boys, and a wife to, well, a really equally active husband who happens to be a first responder. So, welcome our good friend, Claudia Hung.
Thank you.
Hello, Claudia.
That was a very wonderful. Hi, Jen. That was a very wonderful intro. I appreciate that.
What's up? So, yeah, thank you for joining us. So much to talk about today, but that's a snippet of kind of what I put into ChatGPT to figure out for me. But for people that don't know you, can you give us the 411 on Claudia Hung? Who you are, what you do?
Well, your intro was excellent. I think you covered a lot of it, most of it, if anything. And if I were to summarize it, I'm a small business owner, also a wife and a mom, and learning to juggle and balance all those things at once.
Yeah. Thank you, ChatGPT, for summarizing that for us very well. But Claudia, no, I'm all kidding. That we did not use ChatGPT, even though that's kind of a pretty cool tool. Have you used ChatGPT in any of your business yet?
Absolutely. In general, I'm very tech forward. I'm a very techy person. And so throughout my career, even in photography and in the businesses that I've run in the business process, there's always been a quick adoption of technology. And I feel like a lot of times I'm a bit too quick because I'm constantly pulling my team and dragging them into things and trying to get them on board. For instance, I was a big user of Twitter and blogging, when it first came out, and people were just like, what is this? And why are you doing this? Like, why would you type onto Twitter and this and that? When stories first came out on Instagram, I forced my team to use it, and so much hesitation. So I love technology. And so for ChatGPT, when I started seeing it floating around and trending, I was definitely really curious. And it wasn't until I had to watch a few tutorials on how to really leverage it and how to really ask it and prompt it and to use it in our business. So we've used it a lot for copywriting. So we'll give it I mainly use it to generate ideas. And then from the ideas that it generates, I'll pull those ideas and then get it to expand more and build it out. And of course, there's a little bit of customization and stuff like that, but definitely for copywriting, building websites, social media stuff, email templates, building funnels and all that stuff.
It's funny because I remember back in the day, we had similar friend circles, and I remember you were always the one first to start tweeting and when Instagram came around, like you would post so much, right? And you're very good at it, very active with it. And I remember like Claudia was one of the first ones to have stories. I'm like, what is this story thing? And I was just like watching Claudia very naturally like kind of go through it. And if you don't follow Claudia, we'll post links on her IG. And it's such a natural thing. I feel like it's actually with you, you're the most natural at it out of everyone I know. Even like social media people, it feels too forced sometimes. And I think with yours and with how you created your branding, it feels very like fluid and natural, which I think is a testament to your early adoption, right? I mean, the faster the faster you try something and throw shit in the wall, see what sticks. Like, obviously some things have stuck around for a while for you, so it's good.
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing that makes it different for me is I'm naturally a storyteller, right? And of course, photography is a medium or a tool that I've adopted to help me tell stories, but it doesn't stop there. And that's how I used Twitter, and that's how I used blogging, back then, way back then. And that's how I use stories now. It's ironic that it's called stories, but it really is just using different mediums, whether it's text or video or stills, to tell stories, as mundane and small as they are, or as important as they are as well. And that's what I encourage my team and everybody to use whatever stories or social media for, is really just sharing bits and parts of your life and sharing value with people.
Yeah.
Back in the day, obviously we have different views, right? The technology is different, and things that we have access to is different. In your childhood, like growing up, what was your views on money? And like, was that relationship different than how your relationship is now? Can you walk us through kind of like, if you can recall, like back in the day with growing up, like those combos of money or anything like that?
Yeah, I think in the early days, my parents did do their best to instill a sense of money into me and my older brother. So we did chores, different types of chores, weekly chores. And I remember earning, $1 here and there. I think there might have been different tiers of money that you get depending on the chore you did. So
like clean
on,
the bathrooms got worse. Clean the bathrooms got more money.
Yeah,
well,
something like that.
Interesting that you got chore money though, because that's cool. Like I never got chore money, but sorry, keep going.
Well, I mean, it was called an allowance, but it was tied to doing certain things. So that's why, like, if you broke it down, really, it's to do your chores and then you get rewarded for it. And then my parents, mainly my mom, very instilled the idea of saving. That was the heavy kind of crux of everything. I think with a lot of immigrant families, that is the route to success and safety. It's like, save everything you make, just save, constantly save. So that was a big thing in our family in general, and also just instilled in me. And so, I mean, I did that. I made money and then I saved it. And once in a while I would spend it here and there. As I got older, maybe had a part-time job here and there. It was very similar. There was no thought of how do I make my money work for me. Like that was way too advanced. So I would say that was my relationship. Is very similar. It's kind of like that next step. You're making a little bit more money. You're saving a lot of it. Intermittently, I did have some saving goals because I needed to buy equipment or buy XYZ. But that was pretty much it. And as I dove into business, slowly that relationship or that understanding definitely did change and evolve over time.
Yeah, was that was there a certain period? Would you say it was because of business, like business exposed that to you, or was it through just genuine curiosity or a phase in life? Because obviously at some point, you got married with Wilson and you've had your kids now, and that dynamic changes as well. Like, do you remember it pinpointing to something kind of like clicking, or it's just a natural kind of year by year thing?
I do think it was an organic thing, also reading more business books, being exposed to more content, even on social media, about wealth and about building things. And at some point too, I don't know if it's just people talking about it more or there's just more volume because people are just talking more on social media. But there seemed to be a lot more integration, right? Not just talks about money, but then like, how does that influence your lifestyle? and your kids' lifestyle, and how does that integrate back into business? And so it was more of a holistic approach that I could feel kind of changing over, or maybe this is the stuff that I just was exposed to more. And so I think organically through just being exposed to more of the stuff, reading books, I was like, oh yeah, it's all tied together. And including the idea of scaling your business one day so that I don't have to be in the business and growing in that capacity. And so that puts you in a different mindset as well. When you're less working in your business and working on it, you have to think about money as a tool and how do you leverage it and how do you grow it. And I think so. That's just a long way of saying it was organic through a bunch of kind of natural steps that happened throughout predominantly my business life.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So like you started your business, you mentioned to us earlier, you started your business at 19 years old, right? So what was your mindset then when you want to start your business? Was it just because, I guess you didn't have that maybe insight that you have now on building a business? Is it just because it was a hobby or you wanted to make money, or what was your mindset going through at that time?
Yeah. Sorry, just some context. Like when I met you, Claudia, like I actually knew you already as the girl that knew how to take photos, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like, yeah, Claudia. Literally everywhere we go, Claudia would bring a camera around. And for people that like don't know what a real camera looks like, go follow Claudia, see a real photographer. It's like they will peer into your soul with the lens, right? But yeah, like did you work a 9 to 5 before that? Sorry, I want to like give context. Did you work a 9 to 5 before like this whole Portraits on White and the wedding industry?
No, I've never worked a 9 to 5 before. I've had a summer job where it was 9 to 5. My brother, one of my brother's first jobs had a summer opening for students. And so that was my first taste of 9 to 5, like in an office with like, the fluorescent lights, and it was terrible. It was horrific for me. Like I actually got headaches. It was just so uncomfortable. So that was a summer gig, but a good taste of the 9 to 5. And other than that, I worked part-time jobs at the mall, at the local mall in Mississauga where we grew up, good old Square One.
Shout out Charlie's Steakery. We'll come back to Charlie's in a bit. I have actually a few questions about that. Yeah, so like Jen, when you're asking, so like starting at 19, right? Like what's
you're still in you're still in high school, right? Or did you finish I think you were still in high school, 19, OEC. Right?
Grade 13 for all the youths out there.
Yeah, so what was your mindset at that time?
I might have been first year university in 1920. It was not business at all. I think my journey into business as a photographer is very typical, where you like the craft, you like doing the thing, right? So you have a hobby, let's say it's baking cakes or taking pictures or graphic design, whatever it is. Generally people don't go into those things because they like business, they like the thing. So I loved photography and I was like, oh, people will pay me for this. That's cool. So I will just continue to do photography. And so I was always like an artist or a creator first. The business skills, they weren't even skills back then, just came out of necessity. So they're very reactive, right? So at some point someone was like, is there a contract I need to sign? I'm like, oh, sure. That sounds great. That sounds like a sensible, good idea. So then I would figure out how to make a contract. At some point you get a small commercial gig and they ask you for an invoice. And I'm like, oh, sure. I'll let me get back to you. And then you figure out how to invoice people and it's super scrappy. So I think that I feel like that journey represents a lot of people who start off like having a passion, liking to do something. And then they realize, oh my gosh, like I'm running a business and what did I get myself into? I often tell the story that maybe about 10 years ago when Instagram, social media was exploding, I also saw this huge explosion of photographers hit the scene, the wedding photography scene. At that point, it was just so easy to get your work out in front of everybody. The cost of equipment was coming down drastically, and the equipment that was entry level was fantastic. So the bar to entry was very, very low, and I started getting quite scared because you see these like really good people like just popping up like weeds. And then about 3 to 4, I noticed about a 3-year trend. I noticed that these people would just disappear, like they would just stop. And what I'm noticing, or what I've concluded, is that they started to hit a place where it really forced them to be business owners rather than just the photographer. Like the first few years, it's fun. People are just booking you. You can get away with scrappy business skills. But in order to sustain it, in order to grow it, you have to get good at business. And that's where that pain point was. And that's where the barrier was. And so you see this complete drop off. People who just didn't get into that to run a business. They wanted just to have fun, to shoot pictures. Yeah.
So when did you know that you want to become a business? Like you started at 19, you're doing it for fun. Some people are paying you, yeah, okay, that's nice to get a couple $100s, couple $1,000s, whatever. Like when did you know you're like, all right, this is going to be my thing. Like I'm not going to do the 9 to 5. I'm just going to run with this.
Yeah, because I would say growing up, our generation, it was really frowned upon. Well, not frowned upon, but we were heavily influenced about like stability and, hey, go study hard and become a lawyer, doctor, architect, or engineer, or accountant.
That's the Asian. It's not just like our generation. It's our culture.
It's the culture, right? And I find that when we hear stories about like our friends venturing into entrepreneurship, it's like, well, you're the black sheep, but really it's actually, you're not. You're just the person that decided to like, do something different,
carve their own path,
and that's what I want to feel context in, right? It's like me seeing you, Claudia, as like, a friend, and watching you from outside and obviously interacting with you through the years. It's like really refreshing to see kind of that, because our exposure is limited to obviously our corporate careers. And recently with I would call it like entrepreneurial ventures, but never something like someone coming out of the gate and just doing it. So yeah, like back to Jen's question, so like you're coming out of the gate, like how do you know this is it?
I didn't know. I think there was maybe 2 phases that I went through. I think the first was just having the courage to pursue photography just as an artist. I never thought that was possible. Just like you guys, my parents, fairly traditional in that way and conventional in that way. I think at some point when I was, what was I doing? I was applying for art school at the end of university. And so I was taking art classes. I was getting my portfolio together. And I think that helped really solidify and instill confidence in my parents that, hey, I'm actually like pretty talented. I'm pretty good. I think they still had some hesitations and reservations of going to art school and what that meant to be an artist. Like, because to them, that's completely foreign, right? Like,
oh yeah. Well, they're probably thinking like, how are you going to make money? Right? Like that's every parent's like question. How are you going to make money?
Yeah. I have this funny anecdote and this memory of my mom. She took me to watch, I can't remember. It was one of, like, I can't remember what show it was, but it was a musical. And at some point I pointed to the pit and I said, hey mom, like, what if I told you I wanted to be one of those musicians? And she gave me like the dirtiest look ever. And I laughed. And I was only half joking because I love music. I have a music background as well. And it's just ironic how they put a lot of emphasis on the arts. Like a lot of us took, violin or piano, but then they'll never allow you or encourage you to actually make a career out of it, because I just don't think that they can connect the two, that you can make a viable living from that. So the first step was just having the courage to pursue photography as a viable career. I didn't think it was possible. I knew I was good at it, but I didn't know anybody who did it, and my parents never talked about it either. At one point, it was in the middle. I think it was in the middle, almost towards the end of my degree. So I study fine arts. And I said to my parents, I go, I would like to try photography full time. And I'm going to use this time to test it out as if I don't have as if this is my only job. And I said to them, and I'm very proud. I didn't know I was that sensible back in my 20s, but I said, if it doesn't work out, I can always find a normal 9-to-5 job. I think it'll be fine. But I don't have a mortgage. I don't have a family. I don't have a lot of liabilities right now. I think this is the time to do it. And if it doesn't work out, I'll give up on the dream. But I need to really give it my all to have that kind of closure. And luckily enough, they were on board. They kind of, again, you could sense a little hesitation, but they said, okay, like, we got your back. Go and give this photography thing a try. So that first phase really is just me as a photographer, just figuring out if I can go out, if I'm good enough to get people to pay me to do what I do. And that happened for quite a long duration, maybe less than 10 years, but I would say maybe six to 8 years. So still not in a very business mindset, all freelance kind of artist mindset. And then the business stuff comes secondary. It's very responsive to what's happening. And at some point, even my mentor, as I was working, he said, maybe you should think of starting more of a company name instead of Claudia Hung, blah, blah, blah studio, because of the ability to scale. And at that time, I didn't understand. I think I was too young too. And honestly, I think it's just a young person's ego where, there's something about building something under your name.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so gratifying, right? And I was able to do that. And it was very, very gratifying to know that your name is attached directly to your work and people know you and you get the oohs and the ahs. And it was great. But in hindsight, he was also right? So, and this is what I teach my students as well, the people I mentor. It's like, you kind of have to choose, right? There is advantages and there is a route where you can go under your own name and experience a lot of success, but it comes at a cost. It might be harder to scale because people are so attached to your name. And vice versa, if you build under more of a company name, it might be harder in the beginning to build that name out and have a connection to it. But eventually, if you do a good job, you will be able to scale it out because they're not attached to a person. It wasn't until I was really it was the height of my career and I was getting inquiries 2 to 3 years in advance, and getting asked to shoot all types of amazing, interesting weddings, also all over the world, when we started to talk about starting a family. And so this is where it hit hard, where I was like, oh, shoot, I can't, my business is basically for the duration of which we're trying, because there's so much uncertainty when you're trying to plan for family. You don't know when it's going to happen or how you're going to feel, even if you get pregnant. And then after you're pregnant, like what is life going to be like? So there's a huge gap of uncertainty for like the next 2-3 years. And I just realized I can't book things. I can't work. I can't promise that I'm going to be there. I can't promise that, and so that hit me really hard, that this business that I built around my name is not really scalable. I did try handing off some jobs and inquiries to associates, but I felt that tension, right? I felt that hesitation from clients where they're like, oh, but it's not Claudia. And as much as you try to reassure them, there's always a little bit that pushback. And so that's when it really dawned on me, like, oh, my mentor was right. This is the time where I need to create a company name and eventually build something where I can basically step away when I need to. Like if I were to have a second kid or third kid, if I have things set up properly, I can step away, have the business continue to shoot, make money, and it doesn't just come to a halt like it seemed like it was. The way I had set it up, that's kind of when my mindset really shifted. And then that's when I started the company called Wedding Editorials.
Yeah, I recall you going to Jamaica and some other like Europe, Italy, I think, for a few of your destination weddings. It was really cool. Like this was the dawn of like Facebook and social media, right? And so that's how we started. Like we could connect with all our friends still, and we're like, wow, holy crap, Claudia's got to travel a lot. And it's interesting because we never see that side of what our friends are going through, right? Like a business owner going through these thoughts about like, okay, well, how am I going to make this work if I can't actually be there? And there's some interesting ties when it comes to like making money and building your wealth, where at some point, we're taught to work up to 65 or whatever it is, right? With some number in this pie in the sky. But what happens if you actually can't work all the way up to 65, like physically? And some of us, unfortunately, don't get the chance to even get that far, right? So then that's sometimes the impetus for, I think, even for us, is like, well, how am I going to make my money work for myself where we don't have to physically be somewhere? It's
time,
yeah, right. There's interesting ties to it. So yeah, I appreciate sharing that, because I had no idea that's the thoughts that you were going through.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And so when I talk to my students, my mentorees, those are stories and lessons that I've learned. So I often share those things with them before they make decisions as well. And just like, the cycle of life and parenting, like you give your 2 cents and you let them make the decision and you send them on their
Yes.
way.
Yeah. Speaking of those decisions, like you have 2 kids, right? And twin boys.
Mhm.
And that must have put obviously a bit of a twist in how you could operate your business, and maybe you start thinking differently about I guess how to plan for things. So back in the day, or even now, like now when you kind of put this all together, like how would you kind of define what your everyday rich is now? Like, because if you got to a point where I think your business is running on its own. I mean, you're always working on the business at some capacity, right? An owner just never steps away truly, especially someone as passionate as yours. And you have kids, and you have a very active lifestyle, and you're trying to figure all this stuff out just like us. So how would you describe to people, like, what's your everyday rich to you, like the life that you want to live? What's that?
I think the ability to do what you want when you want to do it, if that's the super high level. One of the things I've come to realize in my business is when I define what success or freedom is, it's really the freedom to choose. So meaning there was a time in my business where every job that came in, I had to shoot it. I had to work. I had to do it. And I've come to a place now where I'm thankfully can choose whether I want to do it or not. As an example, we had gigs earlier this year, last year rather, in Mexico and in Idaho. And normally I would have to go because everything hinged on me. But now that I have a team, I just decided I had to come back already from a work trip in Mexico. I didn't want to go again. At that point, too, my dog was getting a little older. I wanted to be home, so I sent my team. So we still made revenue, and I didn't have to go. I wasn't particularly excited about Idaho, so I, I sent my team to
Come
Idaho.
What
on,
do you
like,
mean?
why?
It's
What do you mean?
Idaho.
Shout out to
I
Idaho, man.
mean, it was this. I don't know. I mean, it was a beautiful place. It was a ski resort in the middle of Idaho. Like, this is where everybody goes to ski and kind of take a break. So I'm sure it was lovely, but
Was
I
this a
didn't have a
winter
particular.
gig? It was a winter gig,
You mean
right?
you don't still snowboard,
Oh,
Claudia?
too many questions here. I do snowboard. I'm starting to get back into it through Wilson's influence. And no, it was in the summer, but I think because there was this random mountain there that it was cold enough, plus probably maybe artificial snow, that's like a ski town. But back to what I'm saying is, like, yeah, so there's jobs week after week here and there. And the lovely thing is, even whether it's out of town or local, generally speaking, I can choose whether I want to work or not. And for me, that's the best because it's not like I'm trying to avoid working. As you said, Jason, like I love what I do. I love the fact that I can choose to go to work or not. If I want to get out of the house, see how the team's going, just get my hands dirty a little bit, I can pick a job here and there and head out at really any point. If I want to stay at home, deal with family, spend time with family, I can also do that. And so that is huge. And I think ultimately, that expands to that everyday rich definition is just having the choice. Like if we wanted to pick up and go on a mini vacay or do XYZ, like things would be okay. Like we would have the ability to do that and not maybe be like worry so much about the financial impact.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you just said, because I think it resonates with us a lot. When we kind of sat down years ago and started really giving it some thought, more thought, especially when kids entered the picture. It was just kind of like, what does that mean to us? And I think when we started this whole podcast was hopefully trying to like empower other people to ask that same question, because you've gone down a very interesting path of being able to like literally choose what you wanted to do, and now ultimately you get that flexibility where I would say for ourselves and many of our other friends and even our family to some degree, like we almost don't have, we feel like we don't have a choice because of that that society of telling us, hey, go to your work, come home, do your thing, and then sleep, and then do it all over again. With that, in terms of that flexibility and that choice, right? I think, having an interesting dynamic with your husband Wilson, who's also a good friend of ours too, right? Shout out to Wilson if he listens to this down the road. Wilson is a first responder, like we mentioned, and in the eyes of society has a super stable job, right? That is a stable career, and to either parents, Asian parents, and even the bank would love Wilson, right? From a financing standpoint. We'll connect the dots later, but having that dynamic where it's someone that works, I'm going to call it a 9 to 5, right? A career, and yours is kind of the entrepreneurial journey career. Did those views blend earlier on? Like, did you see the eye to eye at first when kind of those in that sense, or did that evolve through some sort of like conversation or something like that?
No, luckily we were pretty on board with each other's, career choices and financial situations from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I think because both of us are not overly tied to conventions.
Yep.
In all aspects of our life. As you can see, our careers are quite not conventional.
Yep.
From an Asian standpoint, Asian cultural standpoint. I think that extends to our viewpoints of money as well, right? And into our lifestyle, into pretty much everything. And so the good thing is, like, we were dating while we were figuring out our careers for the most part too. So it's not, we went in with eyes wide open. It's not like out of nowhere, hey, I'm going to quit my 9 to 5 and try to become a photographer, right?
Yeah.
So I would say for the most part, we were, we knew what we were getting into. I remember when we were first trying to figure out if we could afford our first house, we sat down, had a spreadsheet, did all these, projected expenses, and had to figure out, like, how much does Claudia have to make a minimum a month, right? Like bare minimum, just to survive and pay the mortgage and maybe, have a decent meal here and there. And I remember after that conversation, it was like, I felt very accountable to that responsibility to contribute to the household and just really, really hustle and make this whole photography thing work.
It's funny because when you're kind of going through that, right, I'm thinking, okay, is Claudia doing the spreadsheet or is Wilson? Because like Wilson's a man of many talents as well. So that's a thing that I think obviously people that don't know you two, like Wilson is a man of many, many talents, right?
Yes.
And when you made that comparison, like, okay, Claudia, I have to do this much, like this is the minimum. It brings me back to university where I was like, all right, I'm entering the final exam with this mark. What do I have to get on my final exam to just the bare minimum to pass?
Yeah, and that dictates what you prioritize when you study.
Right. But the analogy here, like, is literally, this is kind of what do we have to do in our lives to basically, I would say, raise the standard, right? I mean, set the bar is one thing, right? We all have different bars that we all live by, but like, I think everyone at some point in their life, we're always trying to aim to go higher than the bar, whatever that is. But it starts from like literally you two and someone sitting there just trying to figure out, well, where's the bar? And a lot of times we don't ask ourselves what the bar is.
What's the goal and work backwards, right?
Yeah.
How do you get there?
Yeah. It's funny you say that you think most people want to exceed the bar, but I've come across a lot of people who are very content with the bar. They're not particularly driven. They're fairly content, and that's okay. There's no judgment on that. But I've noticed that the entrepreneurial kind of mindset is not mainstream necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I agree. And that's the whole point of like your everyday rich isn't necessarily defined as a specific way to live, right? It's whatever you pick. Social media has glamorized entrepreneurship. Like, no offense, right? I'm using the whole Gary Vee model, right? Like, if you're not an entrepreneur, you're never going to be able to get to this point, or you're never going to be able to have true success or freedom or flexibility. Whereas I've met a lot of people that are quite content, where through entrepreneurship, they've been able to be quite happy because they're adding a lot of value. Like, I don't know, whatever career it is, right? It's like, let's call it an accountant, like one of the top 4 of the Asians, right? The Asian careers. And from surface level, accounting may sound really mundane and stuff like that. But now being exposed to more of these consulting roles, like being an accountant is quite critical to any investor or any business owner's career. Because
you need an accountant.
You need a good accountant. Like, hey, you want to be able to pay less, defer your taxes, right? Not trying to, instill anything legal here, but you want to defer your taxes, you need a good accountant, right? It's this whole like who, not how. I'm not going to try to figure out my taxes now. Like I'm way past that. So, having someone there like that is, it's an interesting thought process because, yeah, we glamorize it too much, but
for sure. There's something you touched on earlier, Claudia, that you mentioned a mentor.
Yeah.
So I want to pick your brain on that. So, why did you decide to get a mentor? When did that happen? How did that evolve?
Oh, just like my early career, nothing was intentional. So it happened very almost accidentally. And it's a relationship I very much cherish to this day. But it wasn't, these days I'm actually literally had a conversation, I think yesterday, 2 days ago, talking about intentionally finding a business mentor. But back then it was just like, so I was looking for more wedding work and I went onto Craigslist.
Oh, wow.
Holy.
Throwback.
I know going on Craigslist now it sounds super shady, right? But back then that it is, but it seems like a tier under Kijiji, like a little more like, like it
I think
kind of
so
got
too.
demoted a bit, right? So I went onto Craigslist and looked for, people who were looking for assistants and second shooters. So I found a posting and he was like, let's meet downtown at a Starbucks. I'm like, okay, I'm like 20, 21 at this point. Again, I'm not sure what my parents were thinking. But they're like, okay. Oh, I don't even know if I told them, but at some point I made my way somehow downtown to meet some dude off Craigslist. Again, this is about 19, 20 years ago. So this is not normal. Yeah. But he was sitting there, we had a chat, and eventually I started shooting for him. And he happened to be an editorial and advertising photographer as well, and which is what originally I was pursuing. I never wanted to become a wedding photographer. It was strictly a side gig just to make money. I ultimately wanted to use that as a stepping stone to shoot more glamorous things for, Vanity Fair and GQ. And, it just sounds, as a young person, it sounds way, way cooler than I shot some old person's wedding. Right.
Yeah.
And just through shooting with him over a couple of summers, and you spend long days together. Yeah, we developed a really great relationship, and he really taught me the ropes. Portraits on White is actually his idea. He started that with his editorial advertising background. He never liked weddings at all, so he eventually stepped away, and then he actually pivoted his business into album making. So he actually started a book binding company that made high-end, beautiful wedding albums for clients because he couldn't find a good one himself. And then eventually I asked him, I said, can I take over Portraits on White? And he gave me permission to do that. And so from that, a few shoots that he did and I did with him, I've kept the style almost identical to what he started, but I've scaled it up so that's a little more modern and anyone can shoot it now to some degree. And like we do printing and QR codes and all that stuff, I've updated it a bit.
That's so cool. So those books that you put together back in the day for our friends and for your clients, I remember seeing them. Like they're super nice.
Great coffee table books.
Yeah,
right?
Great coffee table books.
Yes.
Was that actually from your mentor? Like did you buy those from your mentor? Oh,
absolutely.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because it's he's basically scratching his own itch, right? Just like we're hopefully all entrepreneurs are doing that to some degree, right? You're solving problems. You find that, hey, I wish I had an XYZ, or wish something did, ABC, and you search and you search, nothing fits it quite right or hasn't been done before, and then you go out and do it yourself. And so, he being my mentor, the type of person he is, he created something like totally I would vibe with. It's like it's so sensible the way he created things, and it's beautiful, and blah blah blah. So yeah, those are the ones I would offer my clients as well.
Yeah, cool.
I love that. I just gotta throw it out there. Like, this is Claudia at 20 years old. Like, I don't think I know anybody at 20 years old that would go out and get a mentor.
Well,
like,
again, I didn't purposely. Don't give me too much credit. I didn't go, I'm looking for a mentor. It was I'm looking for work. And
Yeah.
I saw the opportunity to learn from him. So I tried to, be an asset and be valuable to him. And through just an
Yep.
organic relationship, he took me
Yeah.
under and taught me a lot of what I know today.
No,
Yeah.
kudos to you. I think a lot of people hesitate to go and do that. I think, especially an entrepreneur, like I think it's hard for people to go and reach out for help, right?
Even someone that's not entrepreneurial, like we hesitate on asking for help because we have a lot of pride. We believe deep down inside our egos will tell us, hey, we could figure this out ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, go back to your childhood. It was like even our kids are so damn stubborn, probably from me, because like they will not give up. But that's the attitude that we're always instilling on our children ourselves, is like, hey, you don't use the word I can't in the house. And that kind of goes forward to the point where at some point I think it's like, as adults, we need to like almost realize, okay, I know I can do this, but there's probably someone that's been there before, made mistakes, and I want to be able to leapfrog and get there faster.
Yeah.
We talked back and forth a few times about like entrepreneurship, business, and investing and things like that. Oh man, I feel like old people talk, but at some point I think we all look at it and like, okay, well, I got some money now, Wilson I'd imagine contributes to some sort of like pension plan, being a first responder, which is incredible down the road, right? If that's something that he wants to leverage and utilize and stick through, but for yourself, you don't have those traditional, I guess, options, right? So what have you done like over the, I guess, when you started, like when you start giving it some thought, were there any of these things that you kind of said, well, what can I do with some of my money other than obviously reinvesting into your business,
Yeah, that's more of a recent mindset thing. I think realizing that our incomes are just not enough to build the type of future we want for our kids, right? Especially with these soaring real estate prices. At some point, we ask each other, like, are our kids going to be able to afford a place to live?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms that we could talk about. But yeah, I think at some point, it just dawned on me and Wilson. We're like, wow, like we need to figure out a way to multiply our income, because at some point I can't work forever. You talked about the physical ability to work, maybe even mental for some people, right? And so that's why I did start stepping up with scalability, with scaling, so that maybe one day I can sell my business, or at least have it generating revenue while I can focus on something else. So that's where we're just in the mind, and I would say that's a more of a 5-6 year kind of thing that we've kind of been more we shifted our mindset, right? So for the longest time, we were just like working like normal people, hustling and trying to make money. But then at some point we just realized, well, what does this mean? And where is all of our money going? And how does that ultimately impact our kids' future?
Yeah. And then with your kids, they're getting to an age where they're very curious, right? They continue to be curious, I think. And they're going to start asking a lot of questions. Like, has the conversation about like money and like what money is, and they see you go pay for stuff or anything like that, has that ever come across with your kids? And like, how do you introduce that to them, or how have you
Absolutely.
introduced that to them?
Yeah, there's a couple of things we've introduced. I think they're almost 10 years old. So since they were maybe like 5 or 6, and it's funny enough, they have memories of receiving money and interactions with money, mainly through the form of red pockets.
Yeah. So if
Um,
all our viewers that don't know what a red pocket is, and what's it in Cantonese?
Lycée. Yeah.
It's good luck money that's received in a bright red envelope, usually in pairs, from elders during Chinese New Year. So, but yeah, sorry, continue.
Sorry, it's not received by elders; it's given.
Oh,
by
sorry,
elders.
given by elders. Yeah.
I mean, that'd be great if I received it.
Yeah.
And so actually that might be the earliest interaction they've had with money. So since they interacted with and understood that there's like something inside, I would tell them, I'm going to take this and spend it. No, I'm going to take it and set it aside for them.
Mm-hmm.
And one day they would get it back, or we would figure it out at some point. And it's funny because now that they're 10, they're like, hey mom, like, where is all that, lycee from, I was born. So they had this memory of it. And then eventually when they got a little older, we started, because they connected that money can buy stuff. And then they had things that they wanted to buy. We started having a little bit of a plan on how to divvy up this money. So of course they would get like hundreds of dollars over Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year. But we had to figure out a plan so that we're not giving them hundreds of dollars and giving them, opening the floodgates to just go buying whatever you want to do. So we had a little bit of a strategy where we divided the money into, I think, 4 categories. And ever since that, we've had to tweak the percentages and stuff like that, but there's a tithing or giving category. So this is usually for church or just charity, or you want to help someone. Basically, it's meant to give away. The second is investment. So the way we explain it is you just put money in here and somehow it will grow. Like we will add quarters and loonies and toonies and $5 bills or whatever it is for no reason. You put the money in there and it'll just multiply. The second is savings. The third is savings. And then the last one is an entertainment fund. And there's certain percentages that we've played with because sometimes, like the entertainment fund, I thought it was pretty small, but funny enough, it builds up really fast. And then before you know it, they have hundreds of dollars in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had to have a little process of, okay, how do you spend this money and how are you allowed to spend this money? Just because you've accumulated, hundreds of dollars here, there still needs to be a method and a process into how we spend it. So that's kind of their interaction so far. And then we encourage them, although they're not overly motivated to earn money. Wilson has over the winter came up with this, like a snow shoveling business for the boys. He's like, he'll make the signs, he'll promote it. All you guys have to do is just show up. Obviously Wilson will help them out a bit, and you guys can just make cash and spend it on, all your whatever Pokemon stuff. But they weren't overly motivated. So I don't know. We have to fix that little part and encourage them to go out and make money, because I think right now they're used to just getting money, right?
Receiving, yeah.
It's an interesting. I love that you've tied it to those 4 buckets, Claudia, because I've also heard that from some of our other friends, where it's the giving part is one of the pieces where I think a lot of us overlook, because really in today's world where we're just so focused on like making the dollar and making it grow for ourselves, we don't really think about like this whole like, okay, well, how do we give back to people that actually need it? Dollar actually impacts someone's life.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Yeah.
So Claudia, you mentioned earlier, like you were you recently started to look into more like how you can grow your money. So what type of things are you doing right now to grow the money that you currently have?
One of the steps we took, and this is really a lot of coming from Wilson. Wilson has been interested in real estate like since I've known him, and he will attest that I'm significantly slower to warm up to. I've heard this about your dynamic between you two as well.
Yeah.
So maybe you guys can comment on that, but I'm significantly slower to warm up to investment ideas. It's just we just have a different speed, right? I just need a little more context. I need to mull over things, and he's a lot faster. So it took me a while to warm up to the idea, and then really diving into. Also, like I don't have a huge interest in investing. Like I like the idea of it, but then when it comes to the nitty gritty, like I feel like a lot of people are like this, right? Like you like the idea, you're on board, but nobody really wants to look at spreadsheets and research and type things in, right? I'm definitely, I think I'm more extreme because I'm just an artist. But once I kind of forced myself to do that, we did eventually purchase a place out in Ottawa. It's like a condo, as our first foray into real estate. And so that went well and went smooth. I think that created definitely like a familiarity and a comfort level of doing that and opening me up to do another deal. And so we've definitely been keeping our eyes open for other opportunities and such.
Yeah, congratulations on that. I do recall us chatting briefly about that, and I remember getting off a phone call with you once a few years ago, right? And I was like, literally. So you actually, when we were chatting, I was actually at work downtown at my my current employer's office in the hallway, and I was like standing in the corner trying to talk to you. When I got off the phone, I was like, I am so damn excited for her right now. You know what I mean? And it's funny because like, it's true. Like the dynamic between Jen and I are similar, where I would say I'm more open to these things quicker than Jen is. Jen's a bit more of an analytical person,
Yeah.
Which I think is fair and reasonable, because I don't think anyone should just dive into something blindly if they hear someone talk about it, because that's when it becomes like speculation versus investment. But the fact that both of you guys have like chatted about that, where those are tough conversations to have sometimes about like, hey, what can we do, right? Because really, if you've never looked into it, well, how would you know what to do? So it's great that you guys have done that, and you've really kind of carved a path right now for you. Even if it's just one property, I've always said to people, if it's just one property, hold that for 25 years. And let the magic of compounding and mortgage pay down do its magic.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
You will see it will change people's lives.
I think people, like, especially between couples, like risk tolerances can be very different, right? So when you're getting to something that you don't know, you think it's risky, right? Because you don't know anything about it, right? So it takes time for some people who are, more risk adverse to get into a deep dive into it, look into the spreadsheets, watch even like as simple as watching YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Right?
It's daunting.
Just daunting just to learn about. There's so much information out there. You don't even know what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
Right. So congrats to you, Claudia and Lilson, to taking that. Because the first one is the hardest one, I think.
Yeah.
Right. The first one, especially in real estate and housing, like the first one is the hardest one. And once you get your feet wet in the first one, then I think it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. As we kind of wind down, we wanted to kind of have this fun segment about a few things that we kind of do a little bit differently. Hopefully it changes things up, but we call it the CRA, the Crazy Rich Asians, and the EEAO, Everything Everywhere All at Once segment. All right. So it's kind of basically rapid fire stuff, but a little bit of an Asian theme here.
Oh, wow. This is Asian rapid fire.
Yeah.
Rapid
Asian.
fire for Asians.
I won't be I won't be spitting out the questions in Cantonese or Mandarin or anything like
that. And are they just math questions?
2 + 2 is?
I would fail.
Me too, probably right now. Okay. Could you do your job with an iPhone? Could you make portraits on white work with an iPhone?
Yes.
So
is this just literally yes or like? Do I have the ability to expand, or is this just yes or no?
Sure.
I would love to hear what you're expanding.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I hesitated because it was a little bit of a convoluted answer. So my job right now, in terms of not going out to shoot, yes, I can do 99% of, I think, everything on my iPhone. Going out to shoot, that's questionable, right? Because there are limitations with shooting with a phone, but with some technologies, some, polishing and some, I think we can get away with it. But in reality, right now, as it stands, I don't think a professional photographer can really get away with an iPhone. But for most of the stuff I do, which is mostly business development and managing, then yes.
Cool. That's great, because I want to set the record straight that an iPhone cannot do things that you have done. So there's too many people on social media. All you need is an iPhone and you can do this. No, you can't. So set the record straight. All right. Other than your wedding night, have you ever hugged your parents?
Yeah, infrequently, but yes.
Okay. All right. See, this is the kind of the dynamic that I like to uncover with our friends and stuff like that. Because I don't know about you, but I barely hug my parents, but we are trying to more recently. My brother's kind of taken the step of like encouraging, that awkwardness of embrace. And we do it too every once in a while. Remember,
so awkward. It's
the pat on the back kind of thing. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Oh, but that's cool. All right, spaghettini or ramen noodles? You had a choice.
Oh, ramen all the way. I had
All right,
ramen
cool.
with my kids last night.
Yeah.
So
Which brand? Do
100%.
you remember?
No, I went
Which
to
brand?
a ramen restaurant,
Oh, okay. Wow. Jeez. All right. Nice.
like San Sote.
Yeah. All right. I know you guys are obviously very active, and it makes me sweat watching you guys work out. So lifting weights or running a long distance marathon? What would you rather pick your poison?
Oh, neither is poison, but I would rather lift weights because after giving birth, lifting weights didn't do so well with my back. So then I picked up running. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
so it's a little blend of both now.
Yeah.
That makes
Nice.
sense.
Yeah. Sorry, poison wasn't the right word. It's
For some people.
pick your punishment. So negative.
Poison is the same thing.
Yeah. Same thing. Okay. No. Pick your instrument. Color or black and white photos? What would
I'd say
you
black
pick
and
to
white.
print? Okay. Matte or glossy? I've always wondered what a photographer orders.
Matte.
Matte. Okay. Yeah.
I like matte too because glossy, you get the fingerprints.
So
You do.
Easy to get
Okay.
fingerprints.
Was matte always a thing back in the day? Like back in the day where we had 35 millimeter film and stuff like that? Was it always an option?
I think
Yeah.
generally people printed in glossy by default. I don't
Yeah.
know if it's an availability thing or stock thing or it's just an era thing. But like growing up, I remember our photos were all glossy. But you're
Yeah.
right, the fingerprints, and once you put it behind like a glass or screen, then it, like the glossy kind of cancels out anyway. It doesn't matter. So if you get matte, you don't get the fingerprints, and then it looks glossy once you put it behind a screen.
All right.
There you go.
There's your hot tip right there,
Yeah.
guys. Just
Hey.
matte all the way. Okay. 3 people you'd want to have bubble tea with. Anyone in the world.
Just
Anyone in the
Anyone in the
alive,
world.
dead or alive. Dead
Yeah,
or
dead or
alive.
alive. Yeah.
Oh wow, this is a very big question. I don't think I'm prepared. Bubble tea is a very particular type of setting. Probably Jesus. That's the first person I'd like to spend time with.
All right.
Oh man, there's a dude named Craig Rochelle. He's actually a pastor, but he does a leadership podcast for those who are running business and just leadership skills. I just find him fascinating. I find the things he says very interesting. And maybe Tim Ferriss. He's a cool guy too.
Okay.
4-hour work week. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. I was not expecting Tim Ferriss. Cool. All right. Last one, Claudia. Okay. If $100,000 land in your lap, what would you do with it today?
Oh, this is not suited for someone like me.
It's okay. Don't worry. We won't judge with the selections.
I can't rapid fire these big questions. Off the top of my head, intuitively, I would say I'm a fairly sensible person. So I think a big chunk would go towards our mortgage. A big chunk would go into investing in something. And maybe a very small chunk might go to like buying something. But I think that's kind of what the pattern would be.
So as we wrap up here, we want to ask us, what's the best way for our viewers, anyone listening, to reach out, connect with you, to find you?
Yeah, I think the best way is on Instagram. I'm under @ClaudiaHungPhoto, and my stories are up usually daily. I'll post some work here and there, and then you can fire me off a DM as well.
All right, cool.
Awesome.
We will put in the show notes your IG handle and everything, and to your website. Before we leave, is there anything that you would want someone listening a takeaway based on kind of your journey on like figuring out your everyday rich and tying that back to like how to create the lifestyle you want? Like what piece of guidance would you want to give someone, regardless of where they are in their stage?
I think the something I've been learning a lot more over the last almost decade, although it's been instilled with me since I was young is really working on yourself. For me, that's a very natural extension of who I am. I'm always trying to improve every area of my life. And then you can see that infiltrate and how that plays out into my lifestyle. And in Wilson's very much wired that way. As I've gotten older and interacted with more people, I've noticed that not everybody is wired that way. Not everyone has a growth mindset. And that to some degree is okay. But I think working on yourself, being more self-aware, those are the biggest things to even kickstart the conversation of or question rather, what do I want for my life? Like, what makes me happy? What am I working towards? What am I trying to build? Because a lot of people don't even get to ask those questions to themselves because they're just not, introspective enough. They're not working on themselves. They're not connected with themselves or trying to improve perhaps. So I think it's just working on yourself, growing, reading books, following, good people, and surrounding yourself with good people always is a great place to start so that you can, level up from there.
Yeah. Set that bar higher. Yeah. I love it. That was great. So if you resonated with anything that Claudia said, if you've heard something that kind of made your eyes open and be like, oh shit, there's some, I'm totally digging that. Anything that we said, or hopefully it made you think a little bit differently, then, we only ask one thing, which is the fee. And leave us a comment, give us a review. You'll send us a DM or whatever, because we want to hear more about this, right? We want these conversations to flow more with your friends and your family and your circles. So those conversations bleed over to something else. And it leads to that question about like, well, how am I going to live my everyday rich, right? And then hopefully, if anything, hey, if you need some good black and white photography and some wedding photos, the right person to connect. So reach out to Claudia too for that as well. So Claudia, thank you very much for spending time with us and kind of sharing your journey and really giving us a cool view of kind of what you've been doing for all these times we've known each other. So appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it, guys.
All right, everyone. All right. Till next time. Peace.
See ya.
Your Everyday Rich podcast is presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes. Any such information or other material should not be construed as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a qualified professional.